Are you ready?
Ready.
All right, let's go. Kevin here, Top 1 Financial Advisor and best-selling author. We are here to talk about the stock market. Investing at times can be difficult. However, I am here to make it easy. So today, I want to give you 4 things that you should focus on, 4 skills that you should learn as a new investor to help improve your investing journey and really put on the blinders. Because when it comes to the investing world, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of things that are out there for you to pay attention to or even be distracted by. You have financial ratios, you have charts, you have graphs, you have articles, you have news, you have earnings. It's like that's a lot of stuff, and it can be daunting and it can cause a little bit of anxiety to figure out, hey, what are the key things I need to focus on? What do I need to get good at so that my money can grow and I can make better investing decisions? So again, there are literally hundreds of things out there, but I'm going to give you what I think are the top 4 that you should understand, be able to speak the language here, and then you can take this and start to build on it. Okay, so I've got my little tiny notepad here, and we'll go ahead and get started. So the first one is interest rates. Now, we discussed this in a video not too long ago, but interest rates are one of the biggest drivers of the market. But more importantly, where interest rates are going tells you exactly what areas to invest in and what areas to absolutely avoid. And I say that because you've seen all year as interest rates have gone up, tons of companies who were in debt and borrowing to grow at all costs are the ones who are suffering the most. And we explained this before, but perhaps there are some people who are still new. Go ahead, take this time to hit the like and subscribe button. But in either case, this is what companies do. When you are new, especially like a software company or something of that nature, you are trying to grow at all costs. You want to show investors a 50% jump in revenue every single year, and eventually you are going to become profitable. Amazon made this strategy famous, even though they're not the only ones. So when you have, let's say, a Snowflake, maybe even an Airbnb or a DoorDash or an Uber, because Uber was especially in this place years ago, they may still be in this place today, where they are borrowing money and growing, trying to become a household name. Well, that's fine when interest rates are historically low, which is where they were after 2008, 2009, the Great Recession. That's what the Federal Reserve did. They cut rates to almost zero. These companies borrowed, it boosted the stock market, and everything left and right was gravy. It was great if you are an investor, because everything was good. We only had one negative year, that was 2018, from the Great Recession up until now, really, because 2020 the market still bounced back. And guess what happened in 2020? The Federal Reserve cut the interest rates back down to near zero. So a lot of those companies, a lot of those meme stocks took off because they were able to borrow at really cheap rates. Now that those rates are changing, and you can really see those who borrow the most, those who did the best in 2020, are doing the exact opposite right now. So you have to pay attention to interest rates, generally speaking. And I say this, want to make sure I spell it out. Generally speaking here, banks tend to do well in interest rate environments, but they don't do well in high inflation environments, which is why in 2022 they're not doing all that well, even though on paper they should. But you always have to look at context. So interest rates, that is one of the things that you want to pay attention to. You can easily Google and find out what interest rates are, and we talk about it all the time, but the Federal Reserve has notes that they put out every month or so about what they are thinking about interest rates. It usually makes pretty big headlines when the interest rates do move. So it's very easy. If you can't find it, it will come and find you, and it might find you the next day or two. All right, so the next thing here is spending. I am looking at this in terms of consumer, what we call aggregate consumer spending, so how we are spending all together. That is going to determine almost everything. I've said this before, that makes up about 70% of the entire economy. So yeah, where people spend money definitely matters, and why they are spending money in different areas. That is something you want to pay attention to. These are, you can start to really just, if you sit down, like really pay attention to what is going on, you'll see how consumer spending changes. You can also tune in to a lot of the Federal Reserve talks. They are boring, I will tell you that. But as a whole, you do want to pay attention to where people are spending their money. An offhand way to kind of figure this out is when you get these earnings reports, you can start to see like where people are spending their time and their money. We did one about Snapchat, and we saw that Snapchat has grown, but people aren't really spending their money there, and they're still unprofitable, which is one reason why Snapchat is where it is, because they've had to borrow a lot of money, they're losing a lot of money, and that cycle starts to continue. But in either case, pay attention to where people are spending their money. We know because of inflation, people have had to change their spending habits. For example, we've talked about this before with Target, where they put in a big bet on home goods. Inflation went up, people weren't buying home goods no more. No more bookshelves. I still need a bookshelf in my house downstairs. I'm not getting it because food is too expensive, and I enjoy food more than I do bookshelves. But in either case, you guys get the point. Where people spend are going to help you to determine what makes sense to invest in and what things don't make sense to invest in. I'm trying to think of a more concrete example of where people are spending and how that changes things. You could argue, Blockbuster. People are not doing that anymore. I can argue GameStop. Like, where are people spending their money? Are they still buying video games? Yes. Are they doing it in stores? No. Therefore, I need to follow where the money is. A lot of these examples can pop up. Y'all can add some more in the comments, but pay attention to consumer spending. What are people spending their money on, and how are those things changing and growing over time? That's something you definitely have to pay attention to, because anytime you start to see money move, people start investing in things, and companies start to invest in things and start to try and capitalize on that. So it's something you definitely want to pay attention to. The next one here is policy. Policy is extremely important. When it comes to investing, policies do determine what companies do well, what companies don't do well from time to time. The CHIPS bill is one of those things, because Nvidia and Apple, even Intel and others, would stand to benefit from that. When we talk about consumer spending, I can also argue that people are buying more high-tech stuff. This camera, your phone, your TV, all these smart devices and things. That is driven by consumer spending, and now that is forcing companies to act and build fabrication facilities, fabs, here in the US. And now there's a bill behind it, the infrastructure bill, another thing that says, look, there's X billions of dollars that have to be spent in these particular areas, which means that these companies, in sometimes directly, sometimes in a roundabout way, could receive several $billion to start to build and be active. These are things that, again, you have to pay attention to. You don't need to be, a DC policy nerd. I certainly am not. However, I do pay attention a lot to what these CEOs are saying, and I make sure I have my notifications on when certain things are occurring. So you do want to be aware of policy, especially the bigger policy things that can help a particular company grow or has something to do with that particular industry. The last thing is innovation. And this is probably the most important but the trickiest one to really nail down. And I'll illustrate it like this. We all know the story of Blockbuster and Netflix. That was innovation. And I said, look, this is where the world is going. I've got emails that I've sent to people on my email list about how Netflix at some point is going to face greater competition. This was like 3 or 4 years ago, and now we see that, right? That is a part of innovation. We all knew if something is good, you're not going to be only player in town for long, and now you're starting to see those results. I could argue smartphones being one of those things. The fact that the Apple phone was the first one not to have a headphone jack, and now no phone has a headphone jack, and you can start to see this evolution play out. Another good one here is electric vehicles. You almost never saw a Tesla up until maybe, at least I'll say in North Carolina and in parts of Texas, and especially in New York. 2018, 2019, I almost never saw a Tesla. Now I see them all the time. Now I've seen a Rivian on the street maybe a handful of times. I've seen the Mustang Mach-E a bunch of times. And this is what I mean, where now innovation is changing. You're starting to see a new wave of things that weren't always common. This is something you should pay attention to. Now the tricky thing is, some innovations stay, some are overstated, and I'm not gonna say it's a gamble, but it can be difficult to really nail down. One example that pops into my mind for me was like the Blu-ray and even the DVD player. At one point, Blu-ray was the thing. It was supposed to be like higher quality, blah blah blah, and don't nobody use that. Even a DVD player itself, that was phased out. We always talk about Blockbuster compared to Netflix. What happened to the DVD player? When was the last time that you saw one or used one? If somebody handed me a DVD, I guess I had a PlayStation 4 here that I guess plays it. I guess, right? Like nobody really uses those things. Like say same thing for iPod and CDs and cassette tapes, and that y'all get the point here. Y'all definitely get the point here. But you gotta be careful, because sometimes it makes sense, because the move from physical CDs to streaming, that was definitely a thing. The move from like Blu-ray DVDs to streaming, like that was supposed to be something. And it wasn't. It just immediately phased out. I could even go from like the physical, music players. There was a spot right in between there that a lot of people forgot about, where iPods, that was a big thing for a short time until the phone became the iPod, and that was completely wiped out. So it's difficult. It's more difficult on the innovation side, but there are some things that absolutely cannot be ignored, like electric vehicles. Once you start, I don't really see that going backwards. I don't see music now going back to physical CDs, though there are a lot of people who like the physical records and collect those. But I don't think that's going to be a major thing moving forward. It's more like a collectible, niche, cool thing, as opposed to this is just what we listen to. So the 4, again, you want to pay attention to rates. You want to pay attention to where people as a whole are spending money. Pay attention to policy and pay attention to innovation. Those are really the 4 things. Everything else, in terms of like what charts should I look at, what financial ratios should I look at, understanding balance sheets and looking at all that stuff, falls under each of these areas. If people aren't spending enough money in a physical store, that's going to show up on a balance sheet, right? If people are looking at other competitive apps and companies out there, that's going to show up on a balance sheet. You can ask Tesla, right? You can even ask Ford. Maybe Ford's not the best person to ask, or best company to ask today. It was down pretty bad. We can talk about that later. But you can look at Tesla and see how many orders they are fulfilling. That is people spending money, right? I don't need to necessarily go deep into their statements, though it's a decent practice, thing you probably should do. It's not a thing you have to do. But those are the things that you have to really narrow your focus there. What are interest rates? What is the interest rate environment? And when we ask that question, do we expect it to continue to rise? In this case, in 2022, yes, we definitely expect that to happen. Where are people spending their money? Well, we know because of inflation, people are still buying food and groceries. That's something they always have to spend money on. That gives me an investing idea. What policies are being passed right now from a encouragement perspective? Where does the government want to grow things? They want to grow fabrication facilities. They want to spend money on things like infrastructure. Those are places that I might want to look and pay attention to. And then lastly, pay attention to innovation. Now, all of these things have to go together if you're evaluating one company at a time. But it does help me to understand what is going on as an investor, and helps me to be relaxed and more aware of the situation. So today, at the time I was recording it, is about 3:56, and the market is almost closing. It was down 500 points. And I'm looking around like, what's going on? Well, the Fed is supposed to speak. We talked about that. And I'm assuming, I don't know what the announcements are going to be, but it's probably going to be a 0.75 rate hike. And companies that haven't been doing well this year are probably going to do worse. We know that, right? The reason I'm not panicking is because I understand what interest rates do and why they affect these companies. The reason why I'm not panicking is because I know where people are spending their money on. And if I know that, I know that there are still places that make more sense than others to invest in. Okay? So those are the 4 things that you want to focus on as an investor. If you want to learn more, make sure you check out the members only. We do exclusive breakdowns and videos once every single week. We are doing a breakdown on Enphase. I still need to really decode what Enphase does. Y'all saw me struggling with the description, so I want to take my time and make sure I put out some great content. So if you want to join before that comes out, you definitely want to go ahead, click the join now button, hit the URL, go to URL that's on the screen now. Okay, that is it for me. I will see y'all later.